everyone, my name is Liz Robeson, and welcome to my channel, where I play video games and explore the paranormal, the unusual, and the spiritual. But pretty much we just play games because due to the pandemic, I can't do any paranormal investigations, and I can't even do any of the spiritual stuff either, so. Anyways, hi. I actually started recording this, where I started playing this and everything, and then I realized something halfway through. I was halfway through the chapter, and I realized I didn't hit record. I am so upset with myself right now. Oh my god. So now I have to reread. But anyways, day one, we were introduced to our characters, our writer Eiji, our Azami Inn owner, or the owner of the Azami Inn, Miss Kakiochi, and then her daughter Ryuko. If I'm saying any of their names wrong, I apologize, and please let me know how to say them correctly. And if you guys haven't noticed my pronunciation, even with the English language, which is my native language, I'm struggling with. Anyways, day two, things were getting a little interesting and everything. Day one and day two are not too bad on the whole, like, sexual content. Two kind of hinted at it. Day two kind of hinted at it, but it wasn't too bad. Day three, I know how many times I've tried to record this episode. Day three does get a little more into it, I guess, is the right way to say it. If you guys are not comfortable, this is your warning. If you guys are not comfortable with a 40-something-year-old man lusting, fantasizing about a 17, 18-year-old, please go find a different video. Because the last thing I want you guys to do is to watch a video that makes you uncomfortable. Now that that's out of the way, I'm pretty sure after the day three, it's just gonna get worse. So I'll throw out the warning in the beginning of every video from here on out. But now that we got the warning out of the way, we are on day three. But anyways, if you have any suggestions on what games I should play, please leave them in the comment section below. I do stream on Twitch every Monday and Tuesday, but due to the holidays, it's only been on Mondays. But I'm pretty sure by the time this video is up, the holidays are over, and I should be going back to my usual Mondays and Tuesdays streaming. I'm thinking about doing Wednesdays pretty soon, but we'll see how that all goes out. Anyways, let's get to reading, because it's day three! I'll be more excited once we hit day four, because we're halfway through. Alright. It snowed throughout the night, but the flurry of snowflakes seized their graceful waltz, come the dawning of the new day. I stretched cat-like with an evident of the oncoming dawn, so my spine cracked. Then, in what was fast becoming a routine, it's so easy to fall into ruts, even after a scant 2 days, I curled up even deeper beneath my covers, trying jealously to cling onto whatever slivers of warmth I could. We humans are creatures of habit. Though so many of us from all walks of life desire freedom, the surly teenager cloistered within a classroom, the businessman toiling away inside an office, the unhappy couple doomed to further unhappiness by their fears of loneliness, we all, in the end, seem to seek out patterns. Alright. Okay. We humans crave order and travel the world only so we may put everything into its proper place. We classify our flora and fauna, give names to all the stars we see, and jot everything down in atlases, calendars, and endless reports. Even the heart of a wanderer, stricken by wanderlust, will experience pangs of homesickness from time to time. Humans are a contradictory bunch. We say we hate routine, but when routine gives us gives way to anarchy. We flounder with our newfound freedom. We can't cope without structure. Give us too much to think about and too much free time to think about it in, and we start to sink beneath the weight of our own imaginations. You would think I, being an author, would be even more flightly and impetuous than most, and maybe I was in my youth. The younger Aiji, who'd taken Sachiko to see the fireworks and kissed her beneath the starry sky, was filled with flights of fancy. I'm not like that nowadays. In my middle age, I've grown to love structure. It comforts me. I prefer familiar rhythms, like the clicking of a typewriter's keys, or the beating of my own heart. I prefer familiar tastes, like Sachiko's miso soup. Ugh. But if I like order so very much, why did I go to such extremes to disturb my marital life? A life that, to any bystanders, would seem perfectly idyllic. I didn't know. I still don't know. It was too early in the morning for such musings, and it was much too cold. And so, like any weak man who takes solace in dreams, I squeezed my eyelids together and slept. That was so hard to read. Oh, pretty music! When Ryuko arrived to deliver my breakfast, I was dressed and already waiting. I didn't want it to seem like I'd been waiting for her, so I had my anthology of poems in my hands. But that's precisely what I was doing. When Ryuko entered, sliding the wooden door aside to grant her entry, I lifted my head and offered her a smile. She didn't smile back. I clicked it. Thank you. The young girl seemed to stagger beneath the weight of the tray, though my breakfast was a rather humble affair. White rice, pickles, and miso soup. I wondered if it was as good as the miso soup Sachiko made. I wondered still more at Ryuko's welfare and why it was that she looked so haggard and worn, her expression so morose and melancholy. So this is my thought. What if Ryuko wasn't a morning person and that's why she looked so like dragged out in the morning? Come on, guys. She just needs her coffee, man. Or tea. Coffee or tea. I drink tea in the morning. My friend drinks coffee. Whatever she prefers, I guess. She looked as though she had the weight of the entire world on her shoulders. Are you all right? I asked her, foregoing a more typical greeting. I'm fine, she said, though she didn't sound fine. Really. It was the really apprehended at the end, I think, that hammered home how not fine she was, despite her pretenses. Anybody who is fine really doesn't need to protest their fineness. Fineness is a quality that should be evident simply by looking at one's face. Nothing about Ryuko in that moment, as she crossed the tatami floor with uncertain steps, was fine. The sad thing was, I wasn't sure what to do. Do you want me to take your tray? I asked her, because it was the only way I could think of aiding her. Ryuko, however, shook her head. I had expected as much. It's fine. This is my job. But if it's too heavy for you... Like I said, it's fine, Ryuko reinstated. There it was again, that word. Fine. If she'd been a better actress, maybe she would have smiled to assuage me of my worries. But her face was far too earnest. It isn't heavy, really. And Mother would get mad at me for asking a guest to serve themselves. It would be improper. The mere mention of her mother made Ryuko wince. I'd had my suspicions already, of course, but that confirmed it. Miss Kakiochi really was the one to blame for Ryuko's poor moods. It seemed to be a delicate issue, however. Personal matters between families often are, and I wasn't sure how to broach it. It wouldn't have seemed right to launch an inquiry, particularly not when Ryuko was sliding my breakfast onto the table with a mutter of, "Please, enjoy." I couldn't talk to Ryuko. Not like that. Not when she was in the middle of serving me. I thought perhaps she would have answered my inquiries had I asked them, but she would have answered them out of a sense of duty, because she didn't want to upset her guests. Not because she genuinely wanted to tell me. The thought of manipulating her in such a way made me feel queasy. I shook my head. That was no manner for equals to converse. I couldn't be Ryuko's equal because she wouldn't let me. Not like she had yesterday. I told myself I'd have to wait for another opportunity when she let her guard down. The only question was, when? The music's gone. As it transpired, I didn't need to wait all that long, after all. I left the Azami Inn at around 9 o'clock. I had finished my breakfast. The miso soup was not as good as Sachiko's, which would have made her happy, and whiled away a few hours with my thoughts. I can't recall what it was I was thinking about, so I doubt it was particularly interesting, but sometimes it's nice to allow your consciousness to drift. It was very easy to drift in the Azami Inn, surrounded by the trees and mountains and all the beautiful unblemished snow. Maybe I had adapted to the mentality of a snowflake myself, caught in a breeze, willing to land wherever I fell. I had brought a notebook with me to be used whenever my creative muse struck, but nothing I had written during my trip could be salvaged. It was hard to write about snow, I realized, when so much had already been said on the topic. But the snow wasn't all I wrote about. Lost in a swirling haze of sentiment, my pen seemed to move of its own volition, sketching out shapes with unsteady words. Black hair, brown eyes, that tiny pinprick of a beauty mark just below her left eye. And so it was, as I left the confines of the Azami Inn, that I happened quite by chance to come across the object of my continued curiosity. Ryuko was walking through the snow, with her arms moving back and forth by her sides like a little soldier. Her dark hair fluttered behind her like a cape, and her eyes were downturned. She was holding a shovel in one hand, gripping it tightly. She seemed so diminutive, especially when contrasted with the vast, seemingly endless snowscape, that part of me wanted to scoop her up into my arms and hold her. That was a silly thought, though. I wasn't young enough to act on my impulses without fearing retribution. Instead, I called out to Ryuko, gently, and offered her a wave. "Are you busy, Ryuko?" She jumped a little at my address, like she had been rudely awakened from a dream, and lifted her head. When she saw it was me, however, her shoulders relaxed. I could visibly see the tension leaving her body, like water draining from a bowl of boiled rice. She seemed to be in better spirits than she had at breakfast, though she was still jumpy. Nevertheless, she responded to my question. "I was checking the hot springs," she said. "Mother wanted me to shovel snow, as you can probably tell." "So you weren't out burying corpses?" Ryuko frowned. "I know our inn has a bad reputation, but it isn't that bad, is it? What on earth was Yuzuke telling you?" I laughed. Sorry. It was just a joke. Not a very funny one, I know. No, it's all right, said Ryuko, brushing a few stray strands of hair behind one ear with her free hand. I like jokes, even ones that aren't very funny. It can be so horribly gloomy around here. I imagine your mother wouldn't appreciate it. Mother doesn't appreciate a lot. That's part of the problem. Ryuko sighed, distant and dreamy, and clutched the shovel to her chest. But I shouldn't speak ill of her, she said, after a pause. Mother just wants the inn to be a success. I don't know if she picked a good location, I said gently. Not that she was the one who chose it, I suppose. No, this inn has been here for, I don't know, centuries probably. If Miss Kakiochi wants her business to be successful, perhaps she should consider relocating, I asked. I offered it as a casual, airy suggestion, not wanting to sound like a snob. I didn't know anything about business myself, being a writer. Knowing it wasn't really in my place to comment, I tried to tiptoe around the subject matter. Fortunately, Ryuko didn't seem to mind my impertinence. She was a lot more at her ease than she had been earlier. Maybe it was because we were outside and the cool breeze had helped clear her head. Mother would never relocate. It wouldn't happen, she said firmly. Is it because of sentimental reasons? She must have loved your father a lot. Ryuko pondered. I don't know about that. Father died when I was very young. I don't remember much about him. Ryuko, it didn't seem too upset as she relayed these facts. She presented the information in quite a distant manner, like a butcher might procure a joint of meat. It was likely she didn't suffer about her father because she had hardly known him. It's hard to feel loss keenly if we don't truly know what it is we have lost in the first place. I suppose Mother must have loved him in her own way, but I don't think she would stay in this inn for the sake of romance. No? No, she isn't like the heroiness in your poems, said Ryuko with a small smile. She doesn't have a romantic bone in her body. I didn't disbelieve it. I think Mother stays here out of stubbornness more than anything else, because the villagers think the inn will fail and she wants to prove them wrong. Well, stubbornness can be a boon. Ryuko nodded. It's admirable. Mother is an admirable woman. She works very hard. I just wish... But she broke off, and I never discovered what it was that she wished. It didn't really matter. Being a writer, I could imagine what she wanted to say well enough. I'm sorry, said Ryuko, blushing. Listen to me prattling on about these things. I'm sure you are very busy. I'm not busy. I was just going to go for a walk. Oh, Ryuko's eyes lit up. Are you trying to get inspiration for a new poem? Something like that, I said. Can you recommend any particularly good places? I went for a walk yesterday, and I didn't know where to go. I just ended up wandering. Wandering can be fun too. There's a lot to see out here. It's mostly snow and hills, of course, but it's very pretty. It is, but I imagine one gets bored of these sights quite quickly. After all these years, maybe, Ryuko conceded with a small smile. But you've only lived here for 2 days. You have no right to act jaded just yet. I laughed as Ryuko admonished me, waving one finger like a nagging housewife. At least this was how I imagined a nagging housewife might act, because Sachiko had never nagged me once in her whole life. I think she'd sooner iron her hands than waggle a finger at me, even in playful jest. The display was rather charming, perhaps because it was so novel. All right, all right. You make a good point. I'm not jaded about the scenery, really. I should hope not. Being a writer, you should take more pleasure in all this snow than most. I do indeed, but I won't be staying here very long. As such, I want to know about the best sites. I'm a paying customer, and you shouldn't keep them to yourself. Okay, said Ryuko, drawing out her syllables. Thank you for using your status against me. I know where I stand now. But I don't think she was really bothered. If she was, she wouldn't have been smiling so. As for sights, there really isn't much around here in walking distance, but there is a small shrine. A shrine covered in snow? It's not a big shrine, and it's kind of run down, but I go there when I want to be alone sometimes. It's peaceful. I think it's kind of a place that deserves a poem or two written about it, but nobody will write any poems because nobody knows it exists. There are a lot of places like that in the world, I paused, pondering. A lot of people, too. Ryuko smiled, cheeks flushed, and dipped her head like I had said something scandalous. I would be honored if you write a poem about that shrine. It's a special place for me. I want to share it with the world. How altruistic. I know it must sound silly, dreaming about reaching the world when I live in a place like this. Ryuko threw out her arms as if to demonstrate how very barren and empty the landscape that constituted her world was. She was still holding the shovel. The sharp edge winked in the pale sunlight. I don't think it's silly, I said softly. She blinked. No? No. That's the whole point of writing, to share things with other people, to give them your innermost thoughts and feelings, your heart, if you will, to try and make them understand. Oh, that sounds so beautiful. I shook my head. It's cliché. But clichés can be beautiful too. The critics would have turned their noses up at such a simple viewpoint, but as I watched Ryuko, I almost started to reconsider. Maybe clichés could be beautiful if only you gave them a chance. I can give you directions to the shrine, but thinking about it, it might be a bit hard to find, said Ryuko, coy now, as she dug the tip of her wooden sandal against the snow. I could always accompany you, if you want. I did want her company very much. So much so, it was almost alarming. How had this little girl, so skinny as the bleached white sorry bones from yesterday, grown to mean so much to me in such a short space of time? But she had. I had dreamt of her at night and had been thinking of her all day. And though I tried to write about the snow and the stillness and purity and innocence of it all, my pen invariably started to compose odes to Ryuko. But despite my emotions waging war inside my breast, I tried to act cool, aided perhaps by the frosty weather. Are you sure that's all right? Shouldn't you be shoveling? Oh, I already finished, Ryuko reassured me. But what about your mother? Would she mind? She probably will mind. But she minds about everything. Besides, this is all part of the job. Like you said, I'm showing a guest around. It still works. It's still work. And anyway, Ryuko looked at her feet, still shifting. I think I need a change of scenery. Just for a little while. You want me to spirit you away? Oh, Eiji. Ryuko lifted her head. Her eyes were big and round and imploring, like bottomless pits. Please, take me far, far away from here. So far, I never have to look back. Her words were breathless. Her words were a breathless, desperate plea. If I could have granted her wish, I would have done it. I would have done so in a heartbeat. Da, da, da. Reiko deposited her shovel in the wooden storage shed at the back of the inn, then began her new role as my erstwhile tour guide. She led me through the snow-covered forest confidently, at a brisk pace offset slightly by the confines of her kimono. Buoyed, I think, by her exodus from the stifling Izami Inn, she grew more and more animated the further away we got. Soon, she began talking to me in earnest, her face overflowing with smiles. She paused every once in a while to point out various facts about the flora and fauna. Here a colorful robin, and over there a cluster of delicate snowdrops with heavy hanging heads. Reiko told me about the times she had played in the forest as a child, building wonky snowmen until her hands were rubbed red raw, and how once she had lost a sandal in the snowdrift and never found it again. She had tried to placate her mother, saying a wicked mountain witch had stolen it away, but her mother had been less than impressed and sent her to bed without any supper. Reiko told me about the nearby village of Higashikawa, and how pretty all the roofs looked when they were covered in snow, and how happy she used to be as a child when her mother took her on trips there to buy new clothes or sweets or hair ribbons. Reiko told me at night when the wind whistled through the trees and she was lying on her futon, she sometimes thought there were ghosts roaming around these woods. She didn't know why her imagination had extended that far. It didn't dare. The ghosts were just watching, waiting. Their eyes were empty and hollow like holes cut out of a sheet. As Reiko talked and talked, I found myself growing warmer and warmer. Warmer and warmer. Though truthfully, the air was still bitterly cold. That didn't seem to matter when I was with Reiko. Nothing mattered except her. Another cliche, but one that had never been more apt. After 15 minutes of walking and talking, my lovely tour guide finally paused, her stories faltering on the tip of her tongue. We had finally arrived at our destination. That shrine is gorgeous. Oh, it's been such a long while, Reiko said softly, her tones reverent. I've been here hundreds of times already, but I always forget. And her voice trailed away because words couldn't explain how she felt at that moment. Words couldn't explain how I felt either. The shrine really was beautiful. It was a small, humble affair, tucked away in a corner of the forest where the trees were thick and the snow lay thicker. There were no endless stone steps, no pagodas, no pomp, no fanfare at all. The shrine itself consisted of a wooden offering box, and that was it. The box was dusted with white powdery snow, as were the trees about it. Naturally, the box was empty. I doubted anybody would wend their way through the trees to offer anything to a small shrine like this. I wasn't even sure which god this shrine was devoted to. It was probably some local spirit from centuries gone by whose name nobody had bothered to remember. Certainly, nobody had remembered to attend to the shrine. The offerings box seemed to be rotting away even as I stood there, and the ground was overgrown with thick coils of tree roots and broken branches. Still, the shrine was beautiful. It sounds beautiful. I know it isn't much to look at, said Reiko, suddenly self-conscious. I'm sorry if it's a bit of a disappointment. I hope I didn't get your hopes up. No, it's fine, I said, quick to reassure her. I like it, I do. But Reiko fiddled with her fingers, hooking and unhooking them at her front. It was stupid, really, to ask you to write a poem about here, of all places. You shouldn't waste your time on something so banal. Oh, please, I said, rolling my eyes, though a soft flush of embarrassed happiness rose to my cheeks. Regardless, my time is worth no more than anyone else's. You're just being modest. I think your poems are lovely. The critics said otherwise. Well, they're silly. You shouldn't listen to critics. Isn't criticizing their job? I suppose. They should be thanking you, really, said Reiko lightly, with a small smile. If people like you didn't create works of art for them to tear apart, they wouldn't get paid. They're like leeches who profit off your hard work. They couldn't exist without you. A symbiotic relationship? I pondered. I hadn't thought of it like that before. Well, sometimes I have good ideas. Not like going to this shrine, of course, but other ideas. Better ones, occasionally. Maybe. She asked, looking at me for... what? Clarification? If so, I was only too happy to give it. You have very good ideas, and don't worry about the shrine. I'm glad you took me here. But I don't even know when the shrine was built or why. Most of the people in Higashikawa don't even know it exists. That makes it even more special. How does it? Doesn't that make it meaningless? Nothing is meaningless in this world. If we don't know the meaning of something, we can make up its meaning by ourselves. Reiko gasped. Is it really okay to do that? I don't see why not. We repurpose things from the past all the time. It stops them becoming defunct. I don't know if I have the right to repurpose anything. I mean, I'm not very smart. You're smart enough. Ah, I smiled sheepishly, scratching my chin with one finger. I don't know about your praise of my poetry, because it doesn't deserve it, but other than that, I'd say you're rather intelligent. If only she didn't like that awful poem about the fireworks. Why did everybody like that poem so much? I had liked it too when I had first written it, but I had changed a lot since then. The words on the paper, however, had stayed the same. My own boyish emotions, running far ahead of me, had been committed to print for everyone to read, everyone who cared to buy a copy of my anthology from their nearest bookstore, that is. I wondered if they stocked it in the remote Higashikawa. Probably not. It wasn't that popular. I guess it's a bit selfish that I took you here, said Reiko quietly, her brown eyes fixated on the small shrine. I don't know anything about it, not really, but I have a lot of memories of this place. You'd probably think my feelings are shallow, but not at all. If it's important to you, it's important. The reason why doesn't matter. Well, I stumbled upon this place by accident when I was 6 or 7. I was out playing in the forest, and then I got a bit lost, and somehow I ended up here. Like you were drawn? That's it, said Reiko, her eyes lighting up with realization. That's exactly it, like my body wasn't my own, and it was controlled by some kind of higher power. A spirit? Maybe. Reiko nodded her head seriously, as though she would quite like that to believe in spirits and not in pure dumb luck. I didn't blame her. I prefer the romantic option too. Maybe it was the spirit of the shrine, whoever it is. Maybe they called to me, said Reiko. I wouldn't blame them if they did, I said. It must be lonely out here, with no visitors, no offerings, and nobody to take care of you. I wonder if that's why the shrine called out to me, then. It must have sensed that we were kindred spirits. Ryuko, I looked down at her, at the crown of her dark head, and frowned. Were you lonely? Horribly lonely. I had a very isolated childhood. Compared to me, you are still a child, you know. And I'm still lonely. She said it simply, as though it was a fact. Like the sky is blue and the snow melts come springtime, Kakiyoshi Ryuko was fated to be lonely. That was just how life went. But it was so wrong. Why would she have been resolved to live such a sad life? Why wasn't she trying to fight back? Maybe she had tried to fight once upon a time, but fighting had been too hard, too exhausting, and it hadn't paid off. Few things in life do. Not everybody can be as lucky as I. After I found this place, I came here a lot, said Ryuko. Whenever Mother scolded me, which was often, I would run away and hide here. It became a second home, I suppose. A home away from home. Ryuko glanced upward, her big brown eyes taking in all the trees. They were snow-laden skeletons, large and immovable, that seemed to have been here since the dawn of time. I wonder if I helped these trees grow. I cried here often enough. She broke off, giggling shyly. But that's a bit embarrassing. I swallowed. I wanted to hug her so badly, it was painful. I wanted to pull her close and run my hands through her hair, and tell her she never had to feel lonely or shed tears ever again. But those were all lies. I was old enough to know speaking such fanciful words so carelessly would only hurt a lonely, isolated soul like Ryuko. She would believe me too readily because she wanted so desperately to believe in someone, and I would let her for a few brief moments because what man doesn't like playing Prince Charming? But that was all it would and ever could be. A fleeting affair, like the falling snow. I couldn't do that to Ryuko. I didn't want to hurt her. So I couldn't lie to her. All I could do was try to understand how she felt. Did your mother scold you a lot? I asked her softly. She did. She still does. But I can't get away as easily as I could before. I have too many responsibilities now. What does she scold you about? Oh, all kinds of things, said Ryuko with a shrug. Split ends, dirty fingernails, if I speak out of turn, if I talk too loudly, if I don't talk at all, if I oversleep in the mornings, if I don't beat the futons properly. Sometimes I think she scolds me because I breathe incorrectly. Ryuko shifted, perhaps guiltily, and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. She was mad at me yesterday, actually. She said I spent too long in your room. She was suspicious. Ah, I said intelligently, because there was nothing else to say. I had wondered whether this was the reason Ryuko had been so jumpy that morning. I felt like some kind of criminal involved in a vile plot to steal away Ryuko's innocence. I'm sorry if I got you in trouble, I said, bowing my head. I should have known better. No, it's fine. It's not your fault. I knew she would be angry if she found out, but I couldn't help myself. It's been such a long time since somebody spoke to me like a real human being and asked about my opinions like that. I couldn't help myself. You don't get to talk to people often, I asked, though I already knew the answer. The deserted hallways of the Azami Inn made that quite apparent. I sometimes speak to the guests, said Ryoko after a pause. Or they speak to me. The men mostly. They think I'm pretty. Some of them. They would think I was less pretty if I spoke to them about poetry, I think. And what about school? I pressed. Have you ever gone to school? She shook her head. The nearest school is in Higashikawa, and that's too far away. But there are taxis. What about Yusuke? He could drive you. Mother can't afford to let me go. There aren't enough staff at the Azami Inn as it is. She needs me. That's what she tells me. She needs me, and it's probably too late to worry about my education anyway. I'll never be a smart girl now. All I can do is carry trays and shovel snow. I'm sure that's not true. No, it isn't. I can wash pots too. Ryoko's tone was so unmistakably bitter it hurt. It didn't seem right that such a young girl could sound so cynical. Not when she responded to my poem, my silly, stupid, sentimental poem, Such Wonder. A girl who could gush about my early efforts at poetry wasn't a girl who should have co-signed herself to a life of servile misery. She deserved better than that. She deserved much, much better than me. She deserved a man who could write better poetry. I suppose living like this isn't too bad. There are people who have it worse. I have a roof to sleep under and food to eat, and I have my mother. She can be quite strict, yes, but she's never hit me. At least, that's something. I don't know who she was trying to convince, me or herself. Well, I might not be qualified to comment on the situation, but it sounds like your mother expects a lot from you. She expects too much, I think, but I can't tell her that. She won't listen. She never listens. Ryoko's brows creased. She says she pushes me because she loves me. But what do you think? Oh, I don't doubt that. I know she loves me. It's because she loves me that she fusses so much. If she didn't care, she wouldn't bother. And I suppose that makes me happy. But... Ryoko began to fiddle with the sleeves of her kimono, suddenly anxious. Seeing her so wound up made me feel wound up too, and I couldn't suppress a spike of intense dislike I felt towards Miss Kakiochi. How could she do such a thing to her own daughter? Ryoko was so much happier, her face bright and warm and cheerful, when her mother wasn't around. When she'd been talking to me about poetry the previous day, or when the two of us had been walking through the forest, she had been a different girl. A happy girl. As soon as the topic of her mother came up, however, her face clouded over, and she fell in on herself, all awkward elbows, hunched up shoulders. It was a sorry sight to behold, indeed. I know Mother loves me, but I wish she didn't love me quite so intensely. It's a lot of pressure to deal with. I looked at Ryoko with pity, though I knew she didn't want my pity. It wouldn't help. But I couldn't stop myself. I couldn't stop my heart hurting for this poor, lost little girl. If one's love for their children is measured by how much you scold them, Sachiko and I would be the cruelest parents in the world, I said lightly, trying to joke. Your children must be very lucky then, said Ryoko sadly, her eyes downcasted. I wish I had a father like you. I fear I would bore you very quickly. Never, said Ryoko emphatically, shaking her head. We could go on walks, and you could show me your writing, and we could, I don't know, be happy together, I suppose. You're not happy with your mother? I love her a lot, and she loves me, but loving somebody isn't always enough. That's right. There needs to be something more. Love is no good if you don't really like the other person. You don't like your mother? Oh, that's not it. That's not what I mean, said Ryoko, shaking her head. I do love my mother. I respect her, and she's very clever, you know. Very, very clever. Strong too, and practical. Sensible. So I love her, and she loves me. But I don't know if she likes me. Why wouldn't she like you? What was there about Reiko that to dislike? I couldn't think of anything. I'm too flighty and stubborn, and willful, maybe. I don't know. Reiko frowned. I used to snap back at her, and we would argue, and I would run off. But that made her sad, and it made me sad, so I stopped doing that. I just accept it now, and I tried not to run away, but... Ryuko looked about the shrine, at the tumble-down box of offerings and the overgrown trees. Once upon a time, devotees of Shintoism had built the shrine in the forest to honor their gods. They would have lit candles and given money and stood in reverent prayer. Once upon a time, the shrine had meant something. It had a purpose, a reason to exist in this world. Now everybody had forgotten what its purpose was. It had been swallowed up by the trees and smothered in the snow. It was a fitting place for Reiko then. A lonely place for a lonely girl. Coming back here makes me remember those times. I used to dream of running away a lot, said Reiko, looking up at me from beneath her eyelashes. Of packing my belongings. Not that I have many belongings. And fleeing and going. Oh, I don't know. Somewhere far, far away. Much further than Higashikawa. She sighed. But I'm far too young, and I didn't have any money. Oh, but I was far too young, and I didn't have any money, and I would have felt too guilty anyway. How could I run away when my mother loves me so much? It would break her heart. She doesn't have anyone else left. But what about you, Reiko? Do you have anyone? I didn't say those words. I couldn't. It would only have made her sadder, and I didn't want that. Instead, I watched her, my brow creasing. My heart shuddered with sudden, inexplicable emotion. Reiko looked so grimly determined that I almost wished she were a heroine in a fairy story. Then she might have had a chance at a happy ending. The 4th day. Alright. Oh my god, we made it. We made it. Yeah. We made it to the 4th day. Oh my god. That took so much reading. Alright. This is where I left off after my other recordings. It wasn't as bad as I remembered. But it is going to get worse from here. I just know it. So, tell me what you guys think so far about the story. So, that is day 3. So far, I still hate the main character. But I like the story. It's really interesting. I love the artwork. I love the music so far. I do really want to go to something like the Azami Inn. Because just hearing about it, it sounds gorgeous. And I would love to go there. But we're not allowed to travel right now. So there's that. I think that should be it for now. So anyways, if you have any suggestions on what games I should play next, please leave them in the comment section below. If I mispronounced anything, please let me know in the comment section. I like to learn from you guys on how to pronounce things correctly. So I think I'm going to call it a night. So I'll see you guys soon in day 4. Bye.